Yes, welcome everybody. So happy that, to spend the whole day with everyone. And we are, yes, near the end of the day, but we're not letting that dim us down. We are going to keep it going. And I'm so happy to be here on this session talking about, just embracing the cleft story, and joined by our three amazing panelists, as you will hear as I introduce them. So we will get right to it. Karalyn Holden. She is a trailblazing figure in the world of modeling, shattering barriers and redefining beauty standards. She became the first model with a facial difference on the renowned show Project Runway. In an industry often defined by impossible beauty standards, Karalyn has courageously embraced her difference, and it was in her bold stance against the erasure of her scar through photoshopping that sparked conversation and propelled change within the industry. Now, as she is embarking on her latest endeavor as a mother of two, Karalyn continues her advocacy in support of her son, who was also born with a physical difference. She's inspired to use her platform to connect with the cleft community, offering guidance and solidarity. Karalyn has been a longtime supporter of Smile Train since 2008, and is honored to be here sharing her experience with all of you. Jim Rowe, wait till you hear this. He is a cleft-affected adult, an endurance sports coach, an ordained Lutheran pastor, and an at-home dad, and first-time CleftCon attendee. As a pastor, he has served numerous congregations in multiple states. As a coach, he has worked with triathletes, para-triathletes, and even Ironman World Championship qualifiers. He has been married for 21 years, has 2 children and 2 cats, and he has began his involvement with Smile Train in 2022 as a member of the CCAC, and has turned many miles into smiles with Team Empower. And last but not least, we have Monica Bush. Over the last 11 years, Monica has found her voice for advocacy as she works to support her son, Henry, who was also born with a cleft lip and palate. Early in her journey, while navigating social media looking for support, she realized that there was a critical gap. Families needed more than just the comprehensive assistance beyond what some healthcare facilities currently offered. In response, she founded Legendary Smiles, a nonprofit organization dedicated to strengthening and supporting families within the cleft community. And as a result, Monica has become a trusted parent and advisor at one of the leading healthcare institutes, Riley Hospital for Children. Monica's volunteered for Smile Train for several years, is a member of the CCAC, and has also taken on an additional role as a member of their leadership team. So welcome to all of our panelists. So wonderful to have you here. All right, so everyone in this room, and certainly everyone that is here today, knows that the cleft journey is a long one. And no matter if you are decades into it, like myself, or just starting out, it can be sometimes easy to get focused on the challenges and the negatives. So it was important to us to start and end this session with the questions that focus on the joy and the empowering parts of our journey. So to start off, I would like to ask each of you to please share a moment or an experience that brought you a bit of hope or joy as you've gone through your cleft journey. I'll call on you. Monica, you go.
Thanks for that. So there's obviously lots of things that I've learned on this journey, not just one specific thing. It's stretched me as a person. It's made me a better mom. It's made me more empathetic, just more understanding of everything that people go through on this journey. So, being a cleft mom, you have to show up and be brave, and that's really hard too when you're shaking in your boots and super nervous. But being brave and showing up for your kid and having them see you be that constant in their lives really makes a big difference, because Henry talks about his cleft. It's an everyday conversation in our household. So is surgery. It's an everyday thing. And he's actually asked me before, hey, when's my next surgery? He's just a special kid, and that's all he's ever known. Mm-hmm. So lots about resilience, getting up, trying again, even when you don't have it all figured out, just taking one day at a time.
Wonderful. Jim, how about you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure.
You said nap time.
Yes, a moment or an experience that brought you some joy or hope.
Yeah, actually, I think one of the more recent ones in the last couple of years was my first virtual meeting with the advisory council. And it was the first space that I had been in where there were people with cleft lips besides myself. And there was somebody around my age, so early 40s, who shared a very similar story. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have been seen, and they had no idea. And it was just an incredibly beautiful, beautiful moment. And that gives me a lot of hope and pride too.
That's wonderful. Karalyn, how about you?
I think back to early modeling days and not having the courage to, or even realizing that they were photoshopping my scar out or evening out my nostrils and stuff. And it took actually to get on Project Runway. And this was pre-social media, and it was all about the blogs. And there was a big Project Runway blog, and someone in the blog wrote about the cleft. And I was like, I really didn't think about it much in my modeling journey. And the fact that they picked it up, obviously it was high definition TV, and you could see very close to my face in the makeup chair. But it was a positive interaction of someone who had a cleft being like, look, she has a cleft. Oh my goodness, I've never seen that on my TV. So that is like a way back empowering moment for me. I think fast forwarding to now, I have a presence on social media, and I will get DMs from parents who just got their anatomy scan done and found out about their cleft baby, or they have a surprise baby, and just how powerful that is to connect with them and be like, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. Sorry, I get emotional. It also brings me to my son. That has given me so much joy, being able to share. I've had a positive experience with my cleft, and that's possible.
That's wonderful. And I think just, as we've seen throughout all the sessions today, there are those moments that when our journeys do get challenging, we can hold on to that, because we are being representatives to, the younger people coming up and the parents that just have newborns. Like, you're going to be okay. The baby's going to be just fine. And it's nice to be that representation. You mentioned a little bit, just about getting those DMs and things like that from mothers, and it makes me think about, when we share about our cleft journeys, or we have parents that are sharing about, their baby being born with cleft and things like that. And we know that sharing can be sometimes difficult and even a little stressful at times. So I'd like to ask you, Monica, how has your cleft journey, and specifically sharing about Henry's cleft, impacted your relationships?
Yeah, so I feel like everyone in this room would have a story, just positive or negative, in response to cleft. And I'm here to tell you it's okay. Well, I was sitting in another session where it was like, hearing somebody saying something negative, and it was like, okay, bye. Like, you're not my person. So, in my personal experience, I think you kind of have to have that mama bear instinct to protect them. And, people are looking at your child and, might say very rude things. And those are just not your cheerleaders. Those are not your people. And that's okay. And I'm here to tell you, sometimes that's family, and sometimes that hurts even more, because you want people to share in that, all of the feelings that you're feeling. And in the beginning, it's like, well, I don't know what I want. Like I'm just trying to find out. And, when you tell people, it's like, oh, well, it's amazing what medicine can do, and it's like, well, how do you know for sure? Like that feels like empty assurance to me. And so it kind of gives you the time to process. I think we found out ahead of time at 19 weeks, and we processed it on our own, but there was definitely people who were not really helpful during that time. So just, finding those people who get it, especially with surgeries and stuff, coming as hard and fast as it did for Henry's first decade of life, just sending a text or bringing us food or like, can I pray with you? Even something simple like that just goes a long way. So I found that the more transparent you are, the more impact you're going to make. And I didn't let that stand in my way. It was like, I wasn't worried about presenting him to the world because I had processed it on my own and worked through all of that. So just being able to say, here's Henry, and getting that positive assurance from the right people makes the world of difference.
Yeah, and I think too, not apologizing for it, and I think certainly, I was born in the 70s, and it was just like, not a lot of talk about it, and sometimes approaches, it's almost like you're explaining your condition in an apologetic way, like, oh, I'm so sorry, and it's like, well, wait a minute,
I felt like I had to have those words ready to go.
Yeah.
Like when anybody would look at him, I was like always on waiting to give an answer. And I just realized, you know what? If they want to say something, let them approach me. I don't have to act in defense and say, oh, this is why my baby has tape on his lip, or, this is what an obturator is. Like, that's information overload. And I feel like that's going to fall on deaf ears. But
Can I chime in?
Of
just
course,
a little bit?
please.
So my son was born with a limb difference, and I caught myself making it sound better to people who were asking. His was very obvious, the difference. And I would say, it's okay, it's just cosmetic. And I had a friend come to me and she's like, it's okay if it's not okay. And I reflected on that and I was like, I feel like that was also my whole cleft journey, because every cleft is different. I had a unilateral cleft, no palate. I had a pretty simple surgery process. But I still had a journey in the cleft world. I still dealt with some bullying. And the fact that it took me to have my own kid to hear from a friend who was like, it's okay if it's not okay. And I needed to hear that, because then I stopped being like, it's just cosmetic, because I was trying to make it sound better for people that were asking about it. And, it's still hard. It's still so hard, no matter if it's just cosmetic.
Yeah, for sure. Just thinking about that and kind of, the standards around beauty and self-acceptance. Jim, in our conversations, leading up to our panel today, you talked quite a bit about, the work that you did to overcome, and heal from some of the trauma that you went through. And, as you are now, when you think about how far you've come, can you share with us, some of your thoughts on that journey and kind of your perspective now on acceptance, self-acceptance?
Yeah. So for me, it's been like cyclical. I was pretty severely bullied as a young kid between like the ages of 2 and 5. Started to, I would internalize the words that were said about me, and then just sort of the cultural norms for beauty, right? Or attractiveness or handsomeness, whatever. And lots of years of therapy, kind of back and forth. And then really like probably about 4 years ago, so right before the pandemic, my dentist, who is an amazing human being, but I absolutely hate to see.
I think we all can relate to that feeling.
It's nice to see you, but not really. He said, oh, you're going to need a gum graft. And I tensed up. And all of these emotions and images came flooding back from surgeries. And I said, whoa, I need to do something about this so I can actually have this oral surgery done. And so I ended up working with a therapist using EMDR, or eye movement, whatever, and processing some like the PTSD from the bullying and from the surgeries to get to the point where I was comfortable looking at myself in the mirror. And part of it was actually, I told Garrett this earlier, but part of that healing process was actually Googling cleft lips and ending up at the Smile Train website and looking at pictures of kids and adults with clefts and just looking at them. And sometimes it was like for 2 seconds, then I'd have to like walk away, right? And so it was just getting to the point of being comfortable with who I was. And there's still moments, right? Like you have like one of those moments where you're like, oh wow, I remember that. And then it's a reminder of, no, that's, you speak from the scar, not the wound, right? So it's always been, for me, it's been a cyclical process, but definitely worth the work.
Mm-hmm. Monica, I'm curious, just kind of as we're talking about, the self-acceptance part of it, now that Henry is getting older, how do you work to try to help him see, I guess, that he's more than just his cleft? What kind of conversations do you have with that?
Yeah, so like I said, it's something that we always talk about. That's just my social work background and my, just my nature to be talking about stuff like that. But Jim and I actually were just talking about aversions and like smell and like how things bring us back, memories bring us back. His was grapes, mine was broccoli, and just like weird things. But then we were talking about the sleeping mask for surgery, and mine was root beer, and I have fond memories. Whereas my sister had it, and it was just the general anesthesia medicine, and she's like, oh, gag, it's a very different response. So we're kind of in the process of looking for a counselor for Henry, talking about just medical PTSD and the things that he's been through, because we are 13 surgeries in a decade. We had an instance at Target where we were going to run in, run out, just grab a quick thing, after $200 later, because it's Target. But we were hearing a beeping in the pharmacy, and I didn't think anything of it. I was just there for medicine. Let's get out. And Henry had a very, very different visceral response. And he said, Mom, I really, really, really don't like the sound of this beeping. And I was like, okay. And like I looked up at him, and he's got, because I'm bent down, look up at him, and he's got these giant crocodile tears. And I'm like, okay, whoa, like that stopped me in my tracks. And if I could pick him up and just run him out of the store, it's like when you have to hand your baby over. Anytime you have that mama bear kick in, I'm like, let's eject, get out of here, like, let's leave. But what happened is, when you're coming out of anesthesia and you kind of hear the monitors in it's like far away, it's not right next to you. He was having a response to that. So we had talked to our pediatrician after crying in the car and, all that. And he's like, yeah, I really think you need to talk to somebody about it. So we're just new into that journey. But I just reiterate, this is the way that God made you, and he made you perfect in his image. And this is where your self-esteem and your identity comes from. This is on purpose. This was not chance. And so we talk a lot about self-acceptance and just, how we see ourselves, and our clefts don't define us. And as a mom, having to, I want to live that out too. I want my walk to match my talk. So that's something, even a lesson for me to learn alongside. I have to be there 100% and know what I'm talking about. So, we're going into middle school, which is absolutely terrifying. I don't know who's more nervous, me or him. I think I've been nervous since day one, even from preschool, because kids are cruel and you don't know what's going to be said, and you can't be there. I can't follow him around his whole life. but yeah, just I've had that fear in the back of my mind. What is he gonna say? What is he gonna do? How is he gonna respond? So it hasn't been an issue, thankfully, yet. People will ask him like, "Oh, what happened to your face?" And it's usually kids, where he has that. If he wants to talk about his cleft, he can. If he doesn't want to, then move on. It's been a different experience with different people in our lives. I definitely don't want to go to jail over a stranger asking, "Did your kid fall down the slide?" It's been a harder process for me with the acceptance part of it, with people who are maybe not so good of an influence, a little bit toxic, whether that's toxic positivity, that everything's going to work out and it's going to be great and sunshine and rainbows and you're not going to have any difficulties, to the people who just say downright rude, disgusting, just unfathomable comments. So, that has been a lesson in self-control. But also, helping Henry respond in a way that is with self-confidence and not self-pity. And, it's a hard lesson sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Just thinking about that, just how you're saying, kids are cruel, and sometimes those comments don't change even as, they grow into adults. And it makes me think about kind of the way, what we hope to be kind of changes in, the perception of cleft. And so I'm curious, Karalyn, just because, your experience in such a, forward-facing industry, and talking about, taking that stance against photoshopping. And I think we all have seen or heard instances of kids' school pictures being photoshopped, like their scars, being removed and things like that. And it's just like, I didn't ask for that. That's not what we want.
And then they charge you $100 for the picture package.
Right, exactly. So it just makes me think about all the work that still needs to be done. So, Karalyn, what do you think are some of the ways that, society's perception kind of needs to change, and do you have thoughts about how that can happen?
I think it's all about education and advocacy and awareness. This community is so tight, and everyone is so welcoming, but if you don't, I knew no one with a cleft lip growing up, and even as common as they are, people really don't know about it. So I think that's where me sharing my story on social media, connecting with others who are going through it, that's my way of educating people. I've always been like that. It really wouldn't be, because most of my photos were photoshopped for my comp card and everything, which is what clients look at to book you for modeling jobs. It wouldn't be until I sat in the makeup chair and there was a makeup artist right in front of my face, and they would be like, "What's that?" that wasn't in any pictures. And so I would take it as an opportunity to be like, I was born with a cleft lip. And basically, I explain what it is, and I've been doing that over and over again. I actually connected, my daughter now models, and her makeup artist recently, which is ironic because it was always the makeup artist that recognized mine, had a cleft. And so I took it as an opportunity to really ask her, because you're always she's a children's makeup artist, but you're always in kids' faces. What do you experience? Because kids say the darndest things, and they don't mean to be cruel usually, and they're just curious. And she said, she was like, in all my years doing this, I've only really had 5 kids ask me about my scar, and I think that really says something about our kids. It's learned. Their cruelness, that's all learned, and I think that goes down to educating adults about clefts and sharing our stories more. And so when the kids ask questions, it's not like they're not getting a nasty response from their responsible adult. They're getting an explanation. Maybe they were born with this cleft lip. This is when this happens. And a lot of people are born that way. So I think it's all about advocacy and education. And I do see the shift, at least in that, I'm not really in the industry anymore. But I see it in my child's agency and stuff, like inclusion on all realms. Like there's a diversity division with every agency now, and I know it's like that in the acting world and everything. So it's kids with missing limbs, in wheelchairs, like all walks of life. And I really think the shift, we're in a cool time to be raising kids with clefts too, because it's so much more accepted now, and I see the shift. So I'm excited for that.
Great. What about you, Jim? I know that when we were talking previously, you mentioned like with the athletes that you work with, and kind of the whole perfectionist, even in that that realm. What do you feel maybe might be some things that we could do as a society to address those misperceptions?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely been some changes in the last couple of years with, at least in endurance sports, around perceptions of like how people look and in body composition, stuff like that. Listening to this conversation too, I also think about just in sort of religious groups, right? Where, at least in Christian scriptures, where sinfulness tends to be matched up with physical difference, and how that kind of can be perpetuated by the way we talk about things, and even in the songs that we sing, and like the art that we show, right? Like that's, I remember once talking with a fellow pastor who was blind, and he's like, I hate the song Amazing Grace, right? My blindness, I don't want to see, like I don't need to see to be sinless, or to be loved by God, right? So conversation, definitely education is important, advocacy is too, but then also representation, right? Like what would it be like to have in a worship space, and sorry, I'm very Lutheran, but like stained glass window with people with like a cleft, or somebody who's in a wheelchair, or right, like how beautiful that would be, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely the representation and the education is so incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree, and I think just being a part of this for 2 years now, and just seeing the younger generation, certainly, on TikTok and social media, and just getting themselves out there in a positive way, and not always talking about the cleft, but just showing their whole life. Got one last question, and as promised, we're going to end our session with another positive question to help us focus on that, during those times of challenge when we need something to hold on to. So I thought it would be great to ask each of you if you can share a piece of advice for those that are on their cleft journey now.
Yeah, I think so many things. I think from my experience, it was always, it's to be able to separate who you are from your emotions. And, if you're having a tough day, or if you have one of those moments where you think like, oh, I'm like the worst looking person in the world, right? Like to be able to say, no, like that's what I'm feeling right now. It's not actually who I am. And that's so incredibly helpful and important to be able to do that.
Monica, how about you?
I'm going to repeat the question just to make sure.
Just a piece of advice that you give to others on their cleft journey.
Okay. Find community. That's the biggest thing. It doesn't have to be a big, scary conference. Like
Scary?
Not scary, but like putting yourself out there. Like, not everybody's going to come to a conference, and that's okay. But, with our journey specifically at 19 weeks, finding out, it was very isolating because I didn't know what cleft was, what that meant, anybody to talk to. So that's one piece of advice I would give, is to be able to connect with somebody, ask for help, ask the questions, even if your voice shakes, do it anyway. Because I think there's so much power in community, and, being able to be even if it's one person, it takes one person to care. And just, I'm that person for a lot of the families that I work with, and I just give the permission to feel what you're feeling. If it's angry, if it's sadness, whatever that is. I'm in the trenches with you. That's the biggest thing. I understand.
Yeah. Karalyn, how about you?
I mean, that's my answer too. But the community is so important, and surrounding yourself with accepting people who love and support you and your children if they're the ones that are going through it. And I would say, as if you're a parent to a cleft affected child, just raising them with so much just inclusion and not making them feel different. And I see lots of the parents supporting their kids here. I wish my parents were here. I give them so much credit. Anytime I post about my cleft, I bring up my parents, because if they didn't raise me being super confident and never looking in the mirror being like, ugh, like I want to erase it. Like I never thought that. And I think that is all due to my parents. And they just raised me to be a confident, strong female. And I think it led me to where I ended up going in my career path. And I would just stay proud of yourself. If you're still in the journey, stay proud of yourself. And finding community doesn't necessarily mean sharing your story publicly. It could be sending a private DM to someone who is sharing their story publicly and connecting that way. And I've had some just amazing conversations, and their profiles are private, and I might never see a picture of their child and their cleft, and that's okay, because that's on them and what they're comfortable sharing. And they felt comfortable enough to reach out and find that community, and I want to give that to everyone.
Lovely, lovely. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. Thank to our lovely panelists for sharing their experience and their story. We hope that you've enjoyed your time at the conference, and I think we've got another session coming up, so thank you all so much.